we can all chip in and help keep these eateries open. Guys, back to you.
Okay, now we're live again. Well, before we were so rudely interrupted. But anyway, it's just a glitch. I think I don't understand like how to use all this stuff right. So okay, here's the view from my monitor. The other view is from my television, and okay, that's a better view of the room. I said I wanted to promote on Twitter and keep, streaming live. So anyway, we'll try it again, see if that works. It says live streaming on the other window. It's still live streaming live. I don't know, I clicked something or something, let's see. The Queen gave me the boo. The Queen didn't give me the boo. So yeah, my dad lived in St. Louis City and County his whole life, except for when he was away in the Marine Corps in Cuba. And Ronald Reagan, my dad was about 30. Ronald Reagan wants to get on TV on Death Valley days, sell British tobacco. And of course, he's running around the United States, telling my dad's generation that medical care is bad for them because that's socialism. Well, my dad died of lung cancer at 92, 93, at 64 years of age. And Ronald Reagan burns in hell. That's fine with us. That's like, he's going to run around and say, like a doctor for you is evil socialism, while money for the British Empire for their efforts against you. That's okay. He's nuts. The guy's crazy. And you're better off without him. Anyway, you're better off without these people. You're better off with a doctor and without tobacco. You don't need to let a foreign country enrich itself harming you. Because, like, we're on TV, and I don't like the words I want to say.
Well, yeah, I don't think that a lot of people want to use those lines you see forming sometimes on Thanksgiving night or wherever, get an Xbox or whatever. So
anyway. You want to look, Ronald Reagan wants to tell you on TV that them profiting from killing you is good. And you trying to see a doctor, well, that's evil socialism.
Her brother is among those calling for a special investigation.
That's crazy. I mean, besides being maniacal, that's what we mean by, like, when we say a guy's maniacal, he's manic depressive. Maniacal means he's a menace. Maniacal, menace, maniac, manic depressive. It means the guy's a menace. And that's all that guy was. He's a menace. So is he allowed to menace you? No, he's not allowed to menace you. It's like, that's against the Tory Acts. Being a menace, irritating people, being a menace, that's against the law. And of course, that's my birthday. The anniversary of the Tory Acts. And yep, my uncle Menace Maker on my birthday, 13 years before I was born, on the anniversary of the Tory Acts. I think they had a captain, what was his name? James Cook. It says some guy named Cook shot him. They keep coming to our countries and our homes. That's the answer, right, for them to shoot us. They come to our home country. They come to our home where we live and shoot us. Supposedly the guy was staying in a room of ours, and I wouldn't pay. So whatever, he shot my uncle over it. It's just a room. The guy doesn't have any lease. He doesn't have any like deed of trust. Doesn't have any of that.
Cruisers can too. Our best ever hit is the Upper Cruisers 360 fit.
We broadcast this program from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with John Moore, who is president of the House. And this is a complete program. A friend of ours, who was with in charge of the American Center. He was actually the president of the convention center. I can't remember his exact title. Or was there, and he had to call from St. Louis saying he had to go back to be live. Well, someone at the boat show was bitten by a shark. They had a tank.
Was the story of her relationship with Prince Charles. Princess Diana is back in the news. The fresh controversy around the Princess Center on a landmark interview she gave to the BBC 25 years ago. BBC News correspondent Kelly Collier joins us now from London for more. Kelly, good morning.
In St. Louis. Although,
Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, Princess Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, says he wants a full investigation of not just the journalist who conducted the interview, but also of the BBC. Prince William has also weighed in, calling this new investigation a step in the right direction. And over the weekend, a source close to Prince Harry said he too is being kept in the loop.
and there were some stories that I thought.
Prince Harry, from his home in Santa Barbara, is getting regular updates, a source close to him tells NBC News, adding, "You don't need a public statement to imagine how he's feeling privately. People know how much his mother means to him." Prince Harry was 11, Prince William 13, when their mother, Princess Diana, sat down with the BBC's Martin Bashir to tell her side of the story about her marriage to Prince Charles.
Yes, I like suppers, man. But that's the kill, well, what I mentioned. Half a million Americans a year, which is a foreign tobacco interest. Courtesy of the 5 tobacco states, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And you think some girl named Miss McConnell is following that space.
Charles Spencer introduced Diana to Martin Bashir back in 1995. He accused the BBC of a cover-up and is demanding a public apology.
And yes, they're dashing and debonair and successful and on. Maybe you don't want to put that on your TV.
Did coerce Diana.
Maybe you don't.
Persuaded her that she was doing a good thing. Everybody was conspiring.
Their victims are, I guess, Tawdry and let's see, ruffians or something. Oh, let's see here. Let's look better. Teeth need whitening treatments, huh? So, let's see. Now we've been streaming for 9 minutes and 10 seconds. 12 seconds. Skip the seconds. So anyway, I would like to simulcast it, but it seems to like there's a delay. No, don't worry about it.
The worry for me is that people see a program
Let's see.
and forget that it's fiction. And they assume, especially foreigners, I find that they watch the crown, they take the history lesson on what happened.
Now defending Diana's legacy on two fronts. And that interview with Diana's brother Charles Spencer was actually reported before news of this latest investigation was announced, he has said in a tweet that he fully supports and wants a full investigation. We should also note that Martin Bashir, at one point worked for MSNBC, now back with the BBC, has not yet commented. An internal investigation back in 1996 found that he did nothing wrong. Joe, Savannah?
All right, Kelly, thank you so much.
Somewhere.
A 23-year-old British soccer star is scoring goals on and off the field. Marcus Rashford has successfully fought twice to extend a meal voucher program
Hey,
that
friends.
helps feed over
Not
1
just
million
to act
babies
friendly.
for his children.
Be a
And his
friend.
political
We'll
activism
find
is not
somewhere
done yet.
else to
Sarah Hodgman
reside.
has the story. English soccer star Marcus Rashford knows free school lunches means kids who need them because he grew up eating them himself. When England locked down for the first time this year, closing schools, Rashford launched a one-man pressure campaign to convince the Conservative government to keep providing free lunch to needy kids. Eventually, forcing Prime Minister Boris Johnson to take a campaign international free school meals touch the promise to help. This fall, England voted against extending free lunches during school holidays. So, Rashford got back to work, launching a petition that received over 1 million signatures and forcing Johnson in his second year term. The Prime Minister eventually pledged an additional £170 million to help the most vulnerable families until early March. Bates family shows him
surgery, buying some time. If you're dumb enough to contract this, early March.
Bates lives with her husband and 2 teenage sons in the north of England. Her husband lost his job at the end of February, just weeks before the lockdown started. The family struggled to keep food on the table until her son's school told her about the program.
People to confirm psychics themselves. Anyway, I guess you do both. Sort this out in court. What do you think? People have to give money. Or other people don't. Okay, you think the United States are giving money. What other people don't?
She's worried about the situation. She's trying to go to sleep, but she can't because she's so worried.
Let's see what I got on hand.
Around the world, including by the Queen, who awarded him the prestigious MBE award. But Marcus isn't done yet with his next project, a book club, sharing the joy and escapism of reading with kids who otherwise couldn't afford it.
Looks like his work's not done yet, too. It's amazing.
What an incredible story. Thank you for that.
That's it for this hour of morning news now.
And of course, the news continues right now. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser. You're watching NBC News Now. Developing as our top picks, we're learning more about who President Biden is tasking with key roles in his cabinet. No beds anywhere at a coronavirus site. We're on the ground in Minnesota. I will speak to a doctor about what it's like inside his packed hospital. And the dichotomy of disposable income. Many fill food-bank lines, others are ready to spend. We'll explain why and what this means for the
We see how nice you are.
on that list, including the pick for Secretary of State. NBC political reporter Ali Vitale joining us now from Wilmington. Ali, a lot of news going on today. You have been reporting on a key national security appointment we're likely to see. What can you tell us? Yeah, a lot of pre-Thanksgiving news happening here in Wilmington after we heard on the that we were going going to start seeing Joe Biden's cabinet start taking shape here because, again, they're suspended in some aspects of their transition.
Yeah,
Very
he's
much
trying to solve
ahead
it
on
when I
staffing,
showed that sense.
personnel, and policy measures. And so
I've never
just
been
in
that
this
sense
hour,
for
we've started to get a
wow.
picture that Admiral Hayes will
been in the
serve as
service
the top
of
intelligence official in the
the
Obama
Congress,
administration. It's a likely pick for
several
Director of National Intelligence. That news comes as we hear a lot of other things from potential heads of agencies. We've heard some of them. We've heard that longtime cabinet advisor Tony Blinken is the likely choice for Secretary of State. That former State Department official Jake Sullivan is the likely choice for National Security Advisor. And then UN Ambassador Biden is likely to tap longtime diplomat Linda Thomas-Greenfield. This is a position that we expect in the Biden administration to be a cabinet level position.
Why was there a Patriot clause?
Why
is there a Patriot clause? There's no people over there.
But our reporting is such that we think the UN ambassador is going to be cabinet level. That's also true. The Obama administration. So just a little bit of a sense of how that is going to play out, how they view that. All of these, though, are foreign policy facing roles. We're starting to get a sense of the way that Biden is thinking about fulfilling his campaign trail promise, like reestablishing America on the world stage. He's clearly leaning into people who have ties to diplomacy, deep institutional knowledge of how government works, and elevating them here in these posts.
Yeah, read a little bit more in between the lines of some of these picks right now and how these selections do send that message to the international community.
There's 500 things they push that
Well,
for.
the fact that these are people who have experience from the Obama administration, one of the things I've been hearing is that even though this transition is sort of suspended in bureaucratic limbo still because of the lack of letter of ascertainment, they're surrounded by people who have been in these spaces before because the Obama administration, although 4 years has felt like a long time, wasn't actually that long ago. And so there's not necessarily a ton of legwork to be done
It would be like that still.
how government works because a lot of these people have been here before. The other thing I would say is that this group of people on the transition is keenly aware of the fact that a lot of these roles are going to have to go through Senate confirmation. Not always a friendly battlefield, and certainly Washington more partisan than ever right now.
There's no
There's really a lot of this choosing through the lens of who will be great at serving in these positions, metrics of qualification, key, but at the same time, who can get through a Senate confirmation is also something that's percolating in the backs of all of these people's minds, presumably.
Biden's got a busy schedule and members of mayors. What's on the agenda for that meeting?
You're not even have a right to life.
What we've seen from Biden is forging ahead in the places where he can. So setting the tone for coronavirus has been a key thing that he's been doing over the course of the last 2 weeks of this transition, while also having to try to step up the pressure on the general services administration to ascertain the results of the election. Ron Clay, the incoming White House chief of staff yesterday, really trying to ramp up the pressure, saying, hey, look, the only job of this agency is to say what the election is. And in Clay's words, there's no argument about the fact that Biden is the winner here. And so they're very much still waiting for that. Joe Biden going out there, talking to mayors later this afternoon, but also bipartisan groups of governors trying to really solidify that his priority is
we bless you with a constitution, blesses you with money. They think that's why they can take some away.
These conversations, it's assuring these local and government stakeholders at all levels that they're going to have a seat at the table, but also just simply asking what they need. Because we know that cases are getting higher and higher every day. Biden's goal is to know that there is someone who is not abdicating leadership on this. He wants to get it under control from day one. It's part of why they've been putting so much pressure on the GSA. They would like as much up-to-date information as they can possibly get on this, and also just to show that they're ready to lead on this issue on day one.
Thank you so much, Ali Vitelli. Good to see you.
Good turn.
You got it.
For more on this, we are joined by Jackie Alamedi, who writes the Power of the newsletter for the Washington Post. Jackie, good to see you. How likely are these nominees to be confirmed by the Senate in January? We heard Ali say that's a big focus, a big priority in some of these picks.
Yeah, we're hitting the nail on the head here. Deliberately chosen, very moderate, very established Washington figures who are well acquainted with Republicans and Democrats and have been, recycled in and out of previous administrations already. But I think Biden seems very
Maybe they want you to be employed by them. They want you to run around and work with blue or any color, saying I'm taking something from you.
Surging and lives on the line here. But look,
Hey, ever,
hold on to your authority. These battles, no matter how
doesn't have any form.
and boring some of these Democrats are going to be nominated to these cabinets, is going to be huge and explosive battles. Again, this is, McConnell trying to pick a fight here and, gain some relevancy and push back on Democrats using as much leverage as they have here. Lincoln, as Ali noted, who is going to be the Biden's Secretary of State, is potentially less of a firebrand and a problem than people like Susan Rice, who became a lightning rod, amongst conservatives, especially in conservative media, after becoming, integral to the 2012 attack on the U.S. mission in Benghazi in Libya and her roles and her ties to the unmasking of Trump aides. But look, at the end of the day, Joe Biden is in a difficult position if Democrats do not win back the majority. He faces pressure from the left. We're not choosing people who are progressive enough or liberal enough in the eyes of a lot of leftist activists, and then he's undoubtedly going to face pressure on the right, even though we are already seeing some accolades from conservatives of choices like Joe Biden.
And here we are, another Monday of a new week, and we're still talking about this lack of transition from the Trump administration. So what kind of impact is the lack of an official transition having on things like getting background checks of all of the positions that the Biden transition team has to fill?
My family's starting to take back laws. My family, my mom's side, tells me story about each and every one. There's different stories about it. Well, they get everybody each and every one. And on my dad's side, they're out of their county mail. And we've been here, they've been here. My 100 years. So, also over here on the north side of St. Louis, County.
But it's also
Pretty much.
because the Trump administration has hollowed out the federal government.
Let's be kind of like
have shuttered entire offices throughout Trump's 4 years because the president, either need for those offices, didn't staff them appropriately, or shut them down because he didn't necessarily agree with the mission. We do know that there are a number of offices with science-centric missions that became moot under the Trump administration. So my team has a ton of work to be done and relying on papers and science paperwork and storing background processes that can take a significant amount of time of due diligence, which the Trump administration did not do a ton of themselves. This is a transition during a time of multiple crises in the United States.
Jackie, before we let you go, we're going to get a little personal. As we discussed last week, you are recovering from coronavirus, thankfully, hopefully making strides each and every day. But you wrote about your experience, so why did you decide to get so personal with this?
Mine in the store.
I'm totally on the mend. I really want
Or just call like
that is why I'm so reticent. I think right about it. So conscious about writing about themselves. But also, I am well aware I'm a privileged white person with amazing healthcare, an amazing job, and resources and supports to get on this virus. So I was really reticent to tell my story, but I, had a string of interesting conversations while I was laid out on the couch or, half asleep in my bed, recovering with Republican sources who were checking me out. And it was really hard to reconcile these private conversations and what we have been hearing from Republican governors at a very public level in dismissing the health guidance, playing down what Tony Fauci is going on television and recommending to Americans to save lives every single day, and getting feedback from sources saying that you should write about this. My boss, quite frankly, is real, and maybe through reading the change their minds. But I want to be honest with you, I actually had a conversation with the Trump staffer last night. I was kind of nervous about putting this out into the world and thought maybe I should, change course and scrap the piece. And the doctor said to me, you know, you think we'll revisit bigger feet because you worked so hard on coronavirus. And my initial reaction was, oh my God, I don't want to be seen as weak. Maybe we shouldn't grab this, maybe we shouldn't put it out there. And then 30 minutes later, you know, it really was illustrative to me of just how misinformation and conspiracy theories and truth decay, as we know, has really taken hold alongside the coronavirus pandemic. And how important it is for anyone, I think, to be able to come comfortable speaking about their experiences, especially in this time. Save lives or more people change their minds about their actions and how their actions affect.
You gotta write to your share trust statement.
For you to share your story, hopefully people will read that and maybe think twice about a couple of the risks they might have been willing to take. Jackie Alameda, thank you so much. Continue to get better.
Thanks, Lindsay.
The Michigan Board of State Canvassers, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, is meeting today to certify the results of Michigan's election. But the president has been applying pressure to state lawmakers to stop the certification for Biden. Here for more on that is NBC's Heidi Prisbilla, who's from Michigan. She was prime in Joy. And also NBC election law analyst Michael Mullarkey, also the director of election law at Ohio State University. Heidi, we'll start with you. There was a deadline last week in Detroit County for the Maine County's canvassers. What do we expect to happen today?
We have already one of the 2 GOP members on that board at the state level, Lindsay. Telegraphing that he's not going to vote for this, he's going to vote for it. That will matter in my state part. I am seeing Republican on that state level, which would then essentially deadlock the board and delay the entire process. A delay is the operating here. If President Trump is pursuing this in an effort to pressure the legislature to do something, that dog don't hunt. The legislature doesn't have a role here under Michigan law. They have to actually what we're looking at here is a delay. But when I was told by my
Where do you hold your mom's money?
Republican actually wants to delay these serious concerns about what happened.
What are utilities?
Last week because
Well, so they don't pay much.
works for one of
What's a sound investment? Most likely not pay.
the House Speaker for Michigan.
And they just run around and say like, well, teach your mom any money.
Nobody that you saw.
You get to raise your rates.
Just to clarify here, we're not talking about a large.
So we don't even have to talk.
We're talking about a clerical issue. that are
Paul
frustrating
Volcker,
in cities around the country.
I think he is from Missouri.
Ballots.
It bonds, it pays at 16%, 13%, 17%. You don't need like a utility company station on stock.
Where there's a clerical record keeping error. That is just.
Okay, they wanna run around and say like,
And this would be seen as a.
They own that nuclear reactor. And they wanna own that nuclear reactor out there. So they can say they're gonna give it to Illinois for like steel, oil,
So interesting because we're still waiting on the GSA to ascertain.
Well, Cardinals not making tax. Cardinals, let's see their revenue.
Yeah, the president has been trying to apply pressure on
Cardinals
these
budget,
state legislators from Michigan to repudiate the results if they're
They're
certified.
making tax.
Even possibly replace electors with ones who are loyal to him. So are either of those options legal?
Well, it's certainly not appropriate. I mean, never before in American history has the current president attempted
Go all the way back to the end of Bush.
get a second
They're like right beside.
Not.
That's how they steal Missouri nuclear reactors.
Voted against
Fargo,
Michigan.
United States Steel.
You know, it's still and college and.
One river. Well, this guy, yeah, he wants to make sure there's a pipeline there. So he semi-nuclear reactor. And enrich his
I think
claim.
Michigan GOP State Senator Mike,
Get out of there.
one of the legislators who is.
I said, no, you don't get cancer on that. No, you don't get heart disease on that. No, you don't get no cost on that. What you get out of that is heart disease, cancer, and watch. That's what you get out of it.
It's inappropriate for anyone to exert pressure on them. Can you help us? What does he mean there?
And among their suggestions.
Michigan sources who I've talked to, Lindsay, see that as potential for the GOP board members to vote to delay this process. He hasn't spoken any more than he has in that. But his statement.
Must give you the spark of
Again,
these
with
cancer,
no
personal story.
evidence.
And you have to let them take this time. You have to
at this
fly
time.
it.
So again, we're talking about
But
a
this
delay,
oil
but a
is
delay is bad. A delay is bad
Middle
because
East.
this has never happened before.
And then irradiate.
That a presidential election would
Well,
have
so
a
whatever.
deadline award after
My
all these
grandmother,
delays.
somebody to irradiate himself
Certified now.
in their
The
tank.
statute says that this board shall certify it. Maybe they will, or they'll consider it, is even shall do it. That is their duty under the Michigan statute, and it will open up
Whatever,
all
you wanna say it's just like, whatever. Fucker, right?
there are
Just
any
fucker.
number of individuals.
All they was forgetting everything. For his queen. You don't even know. So now his queen is like, I didn't have up there in campus. And out
Then
there on
final
Australia.
question to you,
You don't
do you
need
think
that
at
right
any point
You
Governor
got so
Gretchen
much
Whitmer
extra
can
more.
or should step in
You're
here?
never gonna need it. Well, I don't put that on your arm. All around. It's just like, he's dense. Yeah, he's dense. Right, well, okay, he radiates your brother. Your sister. Your niece, your nephew. Whatever the name is. Makes this guy big. And like, yes, yeah, oh, that's radiation.
Quote of the day might belong
He's
to
double.
Heidi, that dog.
His finger and double.
Thank you both very much for your time.
His finger and double. Hey, go ahead, you know any girls?
Well, President Joe Biden continues his meetings ahead of Inauguration Day. President Trump is not backing down, formally asking for a recount in Georgia. On Friday, the audit of those 5 million ballots certified Biden as the victor. But the Trump campaign continues to fight, trying to overcome the 12,000 plus vote deficit. 5 million ballots will now be counted for a third time. NBC News political reporter Julia Jester joins us now.
So I,
Griffin,
hey, maybe you want to dedicate your body for social dance?
recount in Georgia.
Maybe you want to have a
before Joey chipped away
cause
at Biden's lead. So with more than
human
12,000 votes
adaptation.
in the difference here, what is he hoping to
But maybe
accomplish?
you don't want to do that because you're gonna get leukemia. Thyroid cancer.
After the state has completed a handcount audit, now this recount will involve machine scanning the paper ballots, which does not address what President Trump's trying to get at. He is railing against the state's absentee.
Maybe you don't want to go to vacation, maybe you don't want to take a vacation.
Now, by law, that's not gonna happen with this upcoming recount.
To Southwest.
A little bit overwhelmed in terms of election workers.
You know, the radio goes haywire. It's right up there in Mexico still.
So this machine recount, we're told can start as early as tomorrow, and it's putting a bit of a strain on the system.
And President Trump supporters were out protesting there this past weekend, but are there any signs right now of voter, and you mentioned election official fatigue with all these recounts?
Check it out, Tom.
There is, and well,
Oh, there's something wrong.
change things around here in Georgia. The reality is, folks I've talked to on both sides of the aisle just want to move on, want this to be done, want to focus on that high stakes Senate runoff. Here's what,
You guys want to go out southwest, you guys want to head southwest about this? Not right now.
Governor said that there was no fraud, and so I believe that there's no fraud. We can't, it is what it is, the numbers don't lie.
It's ridiculous at this point. I mean, there's been a lot of taxpayer raised on the horses.
One of those is Mr. Biden.
and as that gentleman just noted, the Trump campaign has to pay for this recount. That cost falls on local jurisdiction.
So let's talk about the states for the Senate runoff races. Republicans are still fighting amongst themselves by battling election officials. So will it ultimately end in the Senate races?
Just like the sixties.
Republican Governor Republican Secretary of State has certified these results affirming Joe Biden's victory here in the state. And the Secretary of State even said it's not our fault that President Trump lost. He noted that 24,000 Republicans voted in the primary. They didn't show up to vote in November, and he Senate candidate adjusting for that after President Trump pretty much not proactively ballot and kind of
Well, next time you forget, drive your car. Radio is really static.
Are the Democratic Senate candidates getting a boost for
That's
Biden
worse
in
than
there?
static clean.
And pay for just what you
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so, I mean,
fair.
here
Worse
is,
than
look
static
at, if you're on the Republican, the message here is hold the line at that GOP Senate majority, and if you're a Democrat, Georgia chose Joe Biden, but in order for Biden to do anything with
That's
the
Robert
country,
Lee.
you realize that he
Sure.
needs Senate.
That's your role.
And so,
He wants to go
John
and
and
have
the
a listen.
Democratic challengers to these incumbents are really running as a leading into it and saying that this is about allowing Biden and Senator Kamala Harris to be the president to enact their agenda and
What do you want to
without
do?
Senate support, without the
They would like to use them for Robin?
Set that as stalemate and they really.
Here's these for.
All right, thank you so much.
Who would like to use them?
Now, with the Trump campaign's ongoing lawsuits, more Republicans calling for the transition to begin, while stopping short of acknowledging Joe Biden as president-elect. Here's NBC's chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson with the latest part of that story.
Thank you very much.
Two key deadlines today set to deliver two more blows to the president's push to deny the election results. With Michigan and Pennsylvania both ready to officially certify their vote totals, showing Joe Biden as the winner. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie slamming the Trump team.
The conduct of the president's legal team has been a national embarrassment.
Now, the Trump campaign is trying to distance itself from controversial attorney Sidney Powell. Powell's among those pushing a convoluted conspiracy theory claiming an international plot involving a dead dictator led to stolen votes.
That's when they came in the back door with all the mail-in ballots, many of which they had actually fabricated.
There's no evidence of any of it. In Pennsylvania, yet another Trump lawsuit now dismissed. A federal judge in a scathing ruling, writing Rudy Giuliani and the campaign asked him to, quote, disenfranchise almost 7 million voters in the state based on speculative accusations, adding, this is simply not how the Constitution works. Now, more Republicans are calling on the president to let the transition begin in earnest.
It's past time to start a transition.
Maryland's Republican governor tweeting the president, who hit the links twice this weekend, should stop golfing and concede.
Frankly, I'm embarrassed that more people in the party aren't speaking up.
President Trump requesting a recount in Georgia now. Taxpayers footing the bill, even after an automatic hand recount shows Biden leading with nearly 13,000 votes. And in Michigan, the state's Republican chair and the head of the Republican National Committee are asking for a 2-week delay in certifying the vote total showing Biden won there. The move, attacked by critics, and worried it's part of a broader push to pressure state legislators to override the will of the voters and give electoral votes instead to President Trump. An extreme and legally dubious strategy the Trump campaign is now openly discussing. Well, that's a possibility.
That is 270.
And that was NBC's chief White House correspondent Hallie Jackson. NBC's Carol Lee joins us now from Washington. Carol, President Trump's legal team, they have another appeal out in the Pennsylvania case. But what do we know right now about the president's response to some of these legal setbacks and those calls to concede?
Well, what we're learning is that he's really frustrated with his legal team, as one could probably imagine, given the number of setbacks that this legal team has had. And you noted the Pennsylvania ruling that was pretty scathing when it comes to what the Trump team was trying to avoid, what the goal is, which is to try to find some way to overturn the results of this election. But also at the same time, there's very few people around the president even who think that they'll be successful in that effort. And so the goal is to really just undermine President-elect Joe Biden's victory and when he takes office, to always have this question hanging over him of whether or not this was a free and fair election, despite that they've not put forward any evidence. But as far as the president's view, he's been frustrated with his legal team. He doesn't like what he's seeing on TV. That news conference last week with his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and then Sidney Powell, who has since been kicked off of the Trump legal team. The president had tweeted in support of Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani. And then, obviously she was removed. But the president's sticking with his team because, frankly, sources tell us that that's all he's got. There's no one else who really wants this job. And Rudy Giuliani had sort of gotten it by default to begin with because the person the president had initially selected
came down with the coronavirus, and then there are others, those serious lawyers in Republican circles who just don't want to take on these sorts of cases because, as you've noted, they are not going anywhere.
Well, over the weekend, the president attended part of the virtual G20 meeting with world leaders, but he skipped a meeting about, of all things, COVID-19 to go golfing. Your sources saying this is a bad look.
We know that people
was representing the president, his analysis continued is brought known by other entities, including communist countries and
all of lives have changed so significantly on a day-to-day basis, but he's resisted that. He hasn't attended a coronavirus task force meeting in months. He's not been out publicly really talking about this, certainly not since the election. He's let that be his vice president, Mike Pence. And, you know, they're pushing back saying that the president did, the White House is saying the president did address coronavirus and spoke to the issue at this G20 meeting. But when we asked the White House for some sort of transcript or a video of him making these comments, they have not responded. So as far as we're concerned, there's nothing that out there in the public domain that shows that the president was really addressing this issue. And as you noted, he was on the golf course quite a bit.
And you have some new reporting on the defense bill that contains a plan to rename bases that honor Confederate leaders. Is the president weighing in on this?
Well, privately, he's telling lawmakers that he's sticking to his position during the campaign, which was that if this annual defense funding and policy setting bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, still has this amendment in it that would rename bases, military bases that are honoring Confederate generals, that he will veto that. Now, President Trump has threatened to veto the NDAA before and has backed off of that. Other presidents, President Obama also threatened to do that. It hasn't happened. It has been signed every year for 59 years. What's different this year is Republicans are looking at the president, seeing his political position, seeing what he's doing with his legal fights and how frustrated he is, and they're thinking he might actually follow through with this. And so their argument to Democrats who also support this is a position that has widespread bipartisan support. Their argument is you should throw out the whole entire bill. It uses pay raises for troops and other provisions that they think are very good for the military, and their hope is that President-elect Biden, once he takes office, will sign some sort of executive order overturning this fundraising military bases inside of the policy so that they can be renamed. It's to say that they're not going to comment on whether he will sign an executive order, and that Republican has expressed support for this in the past.
All right, thank you so much, Carolee. We appreciate it. I want to take a live look right now at a holiday tradition that continues on in a world where so much has been upended. But First Lady Melania Trump here welcoming the arrival of the White House Christmas tree. It's an 18.5-foot tree. Right here, you see that camera panning the tree there in the bed of that truck. There's some ceremonial music playing in the background. And for more on what's going on inside the Trump White House and what options, if any, remain for the president, they're joined now by NBC senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, it's always good to be able to talk to you. All of the electors from each state have to cast their votes by December 14th. And Trump's legal fight to flip some of those swing states in his favor continues to be unsuccessful. What options remain here?
The options actually remain more legal challenges, more appeals. I think a broad way to look at the president's legal strategy as well as the public opinion strategy is to kind of always just move the goalposts and just to buy himself more time to question the validity of the election results, as Carolee was just pointing out, to kind of sully and kind of salt the earth for the Biden administration. And there's still a lot of chaos. And so the president's just trying to buy as much time as he can. But there's been mentioned, and this is really important, all the legal challenges the president's brought. Not a single one that's actually been able to substantiate against fraud, but somehow that these election results are invalid.
But even if some Republican leaders are slowly kind of saying, okay, it's time to proceed. We did see Attorney Justice piece in Georgia, protesters out this weekend. So the president's message is resonating with some. So they have a sign that said rigged. But with all of these outlying votes that are finally getting counted, this race actually turned out to not be so close. Right now, in fact, Joe Biden's popular vote lead is 51% to Trump's 47%. And this would give Biden the second largest popular vote margin, with only Barack Obama's 7-point win in 2008 being greater. So why are some Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, still refusing to support these results?
One, the president is refusing to support the results, still claiming.
Got room for all kinds of clips. And just like, because you expect me to do nothing.
I'm waiting for the sun to come on. I can't sleep with
You're almost back. You're still dropped. Let's keep dropping too. It's not bad. You're bad. I can see FCC.
Limit it all. We want to go in as unified as possible into these Senate runoffs in Georgia, but I think all of it is to try to, placate the president. But as you just mentioned, every single day that goes by, there are more and more Republicans that are starting to have express cracks in that wall. Whether it's Republicans who say that Joe Biden is the president-elect, or Republicans who say, hey, let's start the transition process even if the president can still carry out his legal challenges.
Yeah, despite the president's best efforts, his plan to get state legislators to change their electoral vote doesn't seem to be working. Local Republicans in state after state, they say they continue to support the people's vote at the will of the people. So do you get the sense that the president thought he could sway those leaders and that everybody would just kind of follow along?
Yeah, maybe. I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that the president, despite any kind of setbacks or any kind of challenge, wants to continue to move the goalposts. And again, fundamentally, this is a president who doesn't want to admit that he lost. Even after he lost the Iowa caucuses in 2016, he charged fraud, it was rigged, no way that Ted Cruz was able to win. But he went on to end up winning the New Hampshire Republican primary and the Republican nomination. But fundamentally, this is a president who can never admit that he was defeated, and I think that is really the central issue here.
But Mark, maybe nothing phases you anymore, but seeing those state Michigan leaders at the White House being invited by the president, being hosted by the president under the guise that they were talking about COVID-19, I mean, that's unusual.
It's your money.
It is, and again, take these Michigan state legislators at their word that they accepted an invite by the president, that they told him that their state needs more COVID funding, and that Joe Biden's 150,000 vote lead in their state of Michigan seems to be irreversible. And so we're going to find out what Michigan does later today, Lindsay. But I do think that there is a sense that a lot of Republicans are worried about crossing the president, but also in that saying that it's most the public will, particularly in a state like Michigan, where Joe Biden has 150,000 voters. So I think that's the two dynamics. You're trying to see some Republicans want the title, but we'll see what they eventually do later today.
All right, sounds good. We'll be on it. Thank you so much, Mark Murray.
Thanks.
Public health experts are pleading with all of us to keep our gatherings as small as Thanksgiving, even as hope rises that vaccines could be coming soon. with another drug maker reporting a high degree of effectiveness. The better part
Yeah,
of
this guy wants to sauce, I.
A real close-knit group of
Oh,
nurses
yeah, what's this?
pulled together with your boss, needing help battling coronavirus. You're not just an agent, you're their friend. These folks save our life. Thank God that there are people.
Yeah, he must be the doors and take things out. He won't. Okay, he wants to get in the doors and take this out. Let's see. Let's see what. AT&T line. I'm gonna put on my super run. Put on the ad network line. No. TV. This is Leon lost after a fly. I don't want to add Disney Plus. I don't want to add. They want CBS work. Okay, see this.
At the home team, Black Friday prices are here all season on appliances that you need a holiday help you need to celebrate wonderfully. Save on these Samsung laundry pairs. Appliance shopping improved with the Home Depot. Get more done.
Shop Pandora Kid and enjoy 35% off your total purchase. November 24th through December 1st. With our Black Friday savings, catch your favorite pieces and save 35% at Pandora Jewelry.
Voicework. That's
Right now, it's never going to get to that point.
At your age, help your parents' car insurance company.
None of 5 C's. That's 5 C's are taking on that.
Count them. There are now 3 COVID-19 vaccine candidates touting high efficacy rates. Today, drug maker AstraZeneca announcing their vaccine in partnership with Oxford University is at least 70% effective and could reach 90% by tweaking the dosage. With more on that and how quickly Americans could start getting vaccinated, NBC's Tom Costello. Hey, Tom.
Radiation.
Hey, Lindsay, good day. The bottom line from the commanders of Operation Warp Speed, we could see needles in shoulders within 3 weeks. That's how quickly this process is now moving. And now we have some very encouraging news out of the UK. AstraZeneca partnering up with Oxford University, announcing positive test results out of their vaccine trials. Oxford University and AstraZeneca are announcing their vaccine candidate is 70% effective in protecting against the coronavirus. That's less than the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna that have recently showed a 95% protection. But the Oxford vaccine is cheaper to make and can be stored easily, allowing for more widespread distribution. Oxford also notes the effectiveness of its vaccine jumped to 90% among volunteers given half a dose followed by a full dose.
We will have approaching 200 million doses of actives. So this is the drug substance by the end of 2020, and more than 700 million doses of active by the end of Q1 globally.
The news comes as the federal government is preparing to distribute tens of millions of vaccine doses nationwide. And now the head of Operation Warp Speed says we could see that starting in less than 3 weeks, as early as December 11th.
Within 24 hours from the approval,
the vaccine will be moving and located in the areas where each state will have told us where they want the vaccine doses.
Pfizer is now the first drug company to formally seek emergency use for its vaccine, which shows a 95% efficacy against COVID during its trials. Now, an independent committee is pouring through Pfizer's data to determine whether to recommend FDA approval. A meeting is already set for December 10th. Then the FDA makes its final say. As for who gets the first doses, likely those on the front lines, like healthcare workers and individuals at higher risk. By the end of December, the goal will be to vaccinate 20 million people, with plans to add another 30 million per month after that.
Help is on the way. Effective vaccines have crushed epidemics. We can do that with the vaccines that are going to be coming online.
One other piece of important news here, the FDA has also approved Regeneron's therapy. It's an antibody cocktail. You may recall that President Trump received that when he got sick and bounced back very quickly. The FDA are providing emergency authorization now for Regeneron. Lindsay, back to you.
Tom, thanks. So what's next now that there are 3 possible vaccines reporting promising results? This on the heels of the national 7-day moving average skyrocketing this month. Look at that graphic there. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres. Doctor, the country is moving in a direction that none of us want to see. But luckily, it appears there's some hope on the horizon here. How extraordinary is it to have 3 different drug makers all having promising results within the same month?
And Lindsay, it is extraordinary. We are in extraordinary times right now because we're in the midst of the pandemic. And we've talked about in the past how the vaccine usually takes around 10 years to get one through its process, get it approved, and get it to shots in arms. But in this case, we're looking at under a year because of the amount of effort that's gone into doing this. And talking to Dr. Hahn, the commissioner of the FDA, and other experts, they're saying the important part to realize is there really haven't been any shortcuts. They just compressed the time frame on how they're doing all these trials. And so they believe the safety is going to be there, which is something the FDA is going to show us. But as of now, there's 4 or 5 front runners. 3 of them are really out in the lead right now, giving us that efficacy we're talking about. And so it's important to realize that, again, within a few weeks, people could start getting shots, Lindsay.
Let's talk about this latest one, the AstraZeneca-Oxford vaccine. It's a little different from the other ones we've heard about. Right now, sounds like the efficacy is 70%, but if you kind of tweak the dosage, it could be as high as 90%. Why is it so different?
And it is different. It's a little confusing too. And some experts are saying we need to look deeper into the data that they're giving us to make sure we understand exactly why it's showing that 70% versus 90% if you only get half the dose. Again, that's a little confusing to them. But the reason part of this is going on and it's happening so fast, and a lot of people are excited about this, is because the way it's being made. As opposed to the Pfizer and Moderna, they are using what's called mRNA. It's a genetic material they get to us. We produce what are called the antigens, which talk to our immune system, which have our immune system develop what they need to fight off COVID. So that's the mRNA technique, which is a new technique that really hasn't been tried with vaccines. Instead, the AstraZeneca one is using an older one, and what they do is they use an adenovirus, which is a cold virus, that particularly target chimpanzees. They're taking that, they're genetically modifying that, and they're giving it to people. And when they do that, it's having people produce that same antigen we're talking about. That's more of a proven technology. And so you can see there that what they're trying to do is use the technology to make it cheaper and to make it more accessible to more people around the world, which is going to be extremely important to ending the pandemic globally.
And so we're talking about shots in the arms and the timeline we can expect. And we heard Dr. Slawi say 3 weeks for some people, but we know that people are going to be getting this in phases. So maybe for the average person who's not, for example, working in a hospital, when do they expect to be able to get a vaccine?
And Lindsay, I think the average person is running around March time frame, spring time frame when they start getting the vaccine. So initially they're going to do the healthcare workers who are on the front line, the essential personnel who are out there taking care of people, and those most vulnerable, particularly nursing home patients. And then the next phase, if you remember, there are 4 phases they're going through here. The next phase are going to be what are called the essential or critical workers, teachers, garbage men, those type of people that need to keep society functioning and really can't stay home. And then the third phase are going to be the general population. So you can see by the amounts that Tom Costello was talking about there, by the time they get to the general population, I think we're talking March, April time frame. And the important point to realize too is we still aren't there yet at having the vaccine ready,
So that means that people still need to do those things, especially over the holidays, to keep themselves and their families safe.
Yeah, you could say that again. It is so important to remind people that even though there is hope on the horizon, we're still in for a couple of really hard times. Thank you so much, Dr. John Torres.
$10.
Distribution of the vaccine can't come soon enough, particularly for the hardest hit states like Minnesota. Cases continuing to rise at an alarming rate there, with more than 7,000 in the past 24 hours alone. Hospitalizations have more than doubled since November 1st. NBC's Ellison Barber joins us now from St. Paul, Minnesota. And Ellison, as cases spike right now where you are, there's a big concern at the speed in which the hospitalization rate is rising. So what's the latest on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen hospitalization rates, death rates in the last week, not just increase in the state of Minnesota, but break records. And it's a concern among doctors here in the St. Paul area that they're not in a complete dire situation just yet, but that they're getting very close to it. The state of Minnesota actually asked the federal government, FEMA, to send them 25 ambulances, staffed ambulances, to try and help particularly smaller, more rural hospitals move patients around. With these ambulances, they plan to take patients who can be moved and move them to other hospitals, other parts of the state, so that they can help particularly smaller hospitals actually free up some of their critical care beds. Lindsay?
And so many of our frontline healthcare workers are stretched so thin right now. They're exhausted. Many of them are getting sick. What are you hearing from those who you've spoken with in St. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we talked to a doctor this morning. We've been talking to firefighters and paramedics later this morning, this afternoon. Now, we are at the St. Paul Fire Department. You can see it all around me. They tell me that their fire department right now is going on 15 to 20 calls for COVID flu-like symptoms every single day. And those are calls that are coming in presenting as COVID-19. They say every single call their guys have to go out on, they're assuming that it could be COVID-19 and that a patient could be asymptomatic. I spoke to one of the paramedics who actually drives and is part of the crew to take this ambulance out. He told me since the pandemic started, he has been out on about 100 calls, all of those specifically for flu-like COVID-19-like symptoms. He said even though a lot of these patients will have everything that checks off as COVID-19, some, no matter how sick they are, don't actually believe it's real. Listen here.
We have encountered people that, while they have all the symptoms on the line, are insistent that it's either not real or they are not part of the problem. I know there's a lot of rumors and there's a lot of Facebook speculation that maybe it's a hoax or something, and it's not. It's real and it's here, and we need to be careful and look out for each other.
So when they are going out on those calls, if they know that it is likely COVID-19 and the symptoms, when they get on location, you can see a little in this kind of cabinet area, they have full PPE that they have to put on to go inside. One thing that everyone keeps telling me and reminding me, Lindsay, is that for these firefighters and paramedics out on emergency medical calls, they are rendering care in people's homes. A lot of people, when they walk into homes, they have to ask them to maybe put on their mask. There are surfaces there that could be contaminated. So they are constantly at risk. And they say right now, the number of calls they're getting, the burden, the stress their firefighters and paramedics are under, they say it's some of the highest that they have seen since the pandemic began.
With 18 to 20 calls a day, it very much is real, and nobody wants to be in that gurney that's behind you. Thank you so much, NBC's Allison Barber. As the healthcare crisis in Minnesota continues to worsen, the state's entire hospital system is struggling to cope. Joining us right now, Dr. Jerome C. He's the head of hospital medicine for Health Partners, which operates Regions Hospital in St. Paul. Dr. C, thank you for joining us and taking a break from your very busy schedule right now. Take us inside your hospital. What does your ER look like right now?
Well, Regions is a level 1 trauma center, so it's always been a busy hospital. I think the difference now is that, as you just heard a little while ago, we're getting more and more patients who have respiratory symptoms, likely due to COVID-19. In addition, everybody really is gowned up and dressed in their PPE, and so that, you know, it can get crowded and everyone needs to make sure that they're staying safe. We do have patients who come in with a lot of respiratory problems and sometimes needing intubation right away. And so those kind of conditions make it rather hairy. There's conditions that everybody's familiar with being in a level 1 trauma situation, And yet these aren't trauma patients. These are COVID-19.
There's a pretty stark headline in the Star Tribune, no beds anywhere, it reads. Are you running out of beds in your hospital, and how much more can you really handle before a breaking point?
Yeah. Well, we're at our limits. We're largely in the 90-95% occupancy. And so far we've been able to discharge patients, as many who are coming in. But we have to make accommodations sometimes, and sometimes patients are waiting within the emergency departments. We work as a community of hospitals, both within the health partner system, but also across the state and the region. So sometimes individuals who need to be transferred to regions for higher level of care need to wait a little bit longer, or we use our shared processes to find them a more immediate location where patients can be cared for. But yeah, I mean, at any point, if our numbers continue to escalate at points where there aren't enough beds across our system, it will be much harder. And it's not just the bed, right? It's also the staffing that we need to have available to take care of our patients.
Yeah, and a lot of the staffing we're hearing from, I mean, they're suffering too, many of them shedding tears over some of the things they're seeing on a day-to-day basis. But doctor, when you hear in Ellison's piece that paramedics say some people are still denying this, and also we see crowded airports right now, people defying CDC warnings, and they're getting on that plane at risk of exposing themselves and others. What do you say to those people? How concerned are you that the actions that we're seeing this week will lead to even more of a crisis in Minnesota over the coming weeks?
You know, I like to think about what is our future going to look like. And if we can stay home, we should stay home, because we want to be able to have those moments with family and friends in the future. There are times that people have to be able to travel or to be with family. And I would say to be careful, to mask up, to think about your community as well as yourself. Be socially distant and avoid those crowds as much as you can.
Doctor, we certainly hope conditions improve where you are and the rest of your state, but thank you for talking to us and giving us a picture of what it is like to be in this hall. Dr. Jerome Steep, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next, COVID's unequal impact on the economy, why some people are actually doing better in the pandemic. A real close-knit group of nurses who pulled together with their boss needing help battling coronavirus. You're not just any patient, you're the planet. These folks save our life. Thank God that there are people. Nature Maid's range of sleep products helps you win the night. No matter what sometimes keeps you up. It's your mind, your phone, or your work. From falling asleep to staying asleep. Nature Maid sleep products are scientifically developed to help you win the night, so you can go to bed confident. Nature Maid, the #1 pharmacist recommended vitamin and supplement brand.
Once weekly Ozempic is helping many people with type 2 diabetes like Emily lower their blood sugar. A majority of adults who took Ozempic reached an A1C under 7 and maintained. Here's your A1C.
Oh, my A1C is under 7.
And you may lose weight. Adults who took Ozempic lost on average up to 12 pounds.
I lost almost 12 pounds. Oh!
For those also with known heart disease, Ozempic lowers the risk of major cardiovascular events such as heart attack, stroke, or death.
It lowers the risk. Oh? And I only have to take it once a week. Oh!
Ozempic is not for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or pens. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with a sulfonylurea or insulin may increase low blood sugar risk. Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
Once weekly Ozempic is helping me reach my blood sugar goal.
You may pay as little as $25 for a 1-month or 3-month prescription. Ask your healthcare provider today about once weekly Ozempic.
Ready or not, here I come. Gillette ProGlide Gel.
5 blades and a pivoting flex ball designed to get virtually every hair on the first stroke while washing away dirt and oil. So you're ready for the day with a clean shave and a clean face.
Babe, I got some chase offers for a little project. What should I get?
Surprise. What you got? Blue.
Chase offer. What deals and what you love. Find you.
At the Home Depot, get Black Friday prices now through December on everything you need to show your holiday achievement, from tabletops to treetops. Shout from the rooftops. Decorating improved with the Home Depot. Our doers get more done.
Now to the tale of two economies. Against the backdrop of record unemployment and historic lines at food banks, many of us are saving at twice the rate we did before the pandemic. To top it off, credit card debt has plunged while disposable income has risen. Let's bring in NBC's business and technology correspondent Joey Kent to kind of make sense of the mixed messages we're getting. So, Joe, it's nice to hear some good news. Consumers are generally doing well. What's behind it, and who will benefit the most here?
So the people who are benefiting from this great moment of savings are people who have jobs, who are doing well, the upper tier of consumers, as it were. And so, we report a lot on the unemployment that is plaguing our country right now. Over 20 million people are currently collecting unemployment benefits. But on the other side of it, you do see a rising savings rate. It's about 14% right now. And you see that people who are able to save, they're able to pay down credit card debt and other kinds of loans and debt that they may have on hand right now. So it's good news for those who are doing well, but there are so many people who are left behind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There is also good news for small businesses that are struggling. Of course, the holiday season is coming up. So does this mean that those businesses might see a boost this time of year?
Yeah, we hope so. It really depends, because if you look at the broader shutdowns that we've all been reporting on over the past few weeks, you think about the small businesses and the restaurants, for example, and you think about the LA County new regulation that for the next 3 weeks there can be no outdoor dining. That is going to decimate small restaurants, right? Because they have to-go orders, it doesn't mean they'll be able to survive. But on the flip side, I just spoke to National Retail Federation CEO Matthew Shea, and we've been talking to him for years now about how retail continues to boom, and he says that he's feeling really confident about this holiday season, that spending is going to be up, that there was a huge boom of retail spending. It was just how people were spending that changed, right? And so you see that being buoyed by the stimulus that, of course, ended back on July 31st. But the real question is, folks like the National Retail Federation, Matthew Shea, tell me we also need more help going forward to continue this trend. And so he says that they're working both with the current administration and the incoming Biden administration to figure out what can be done to get something as soon as possible.
Now, hopefully that bodes well for the small businesses that can keep people on the payroll. But you said that magic word, stimulus. Right now, so many people are still hurting. We're seeing hours-long lines at food banks, and it's not even Thanksgiving yet. So is help on the horizon for those hardest hit?
There is not federal help on the horizon. I hate to say it. And so there's no concrete plan in motion. The various sides have their various proposals, but in terms of compromise and agreement, we don't have anything hard just yet. We do know that Secretary Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, does want to have talks with the Democrats, so that could be a step forward. He wants to do it in the next several weeks. But we've heard that before. We've heard promises of stimulus coming right after the election, and there's been no movement on that front as well. And so it's been really hard to see. We do have big nonprofits and donors and people stepping up, donating, especially ahead of Thanksgiving, as people assess where they are in their own lives of giving to try to help those in need. And so that's why you're seeing so many food banks able to deliver that amount of food in those big mobile food banks where everyone's lined up in their cars. So the need is still very great. but some of these food banks are telling me they are able to serve a lot more people as that need continues to unfortunately grow. Well, and as you're talking, I can't help but think it feels like the people who are already doing okay are doing better, and the people who are already struggling are doing worse. So are we seeing a growing divide here between the haves and the have-nots?
House.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that you always see that right now in our country. It's sort of been an ongoing trend. I think it's been exacerbated if you just look at the data. If you look at the data we were just talking about earlier in our conversation, all that the St. Louis Fed, you do see that there is this growing gulf between those who can make it and those who cannot. And you have to remember the hardest hit industries are those that are driven by low-income workers. We're talking hospitality, restaurants. It's also driven by people of color. It's driven by women. And so you are seeing the cleavages happen and these cleavages happening because of these major differences. You can't work from home when you are, a cleaning professional or when you are supposed to be a server at a restaurant. So we've heard all these countless stories of servers all across the country saying to their kids, look, there's not going to be Christmas this year. We have to try and keep this roof over our heads. So it's just all right, thank you for breaking that down for us, Joni Kemp. We appreciate it. Stay with NBC News now. And remember, you can take us with you on the Peacock app, the NBC News app, or online at NBCNewsNow.com. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what we're watching at this hour. Numerous legal battles waged by the president. Boy, it's not going well for him. Healthcare workers catching COVID, the dire situation in Ohio, and breaking barriers, the record number of GOP women elected to Congress. Over the weekend, the president suffered a major legal setback in his attempts to overturn the results of the election in Pennsylvania. A Republican federal judge dismissed the case in a scathing 37-page opinion. Among his conclusions, this court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations, finding that in the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its sixth most populated state. NBC News political reporter Monica Alba joining us right now from the White House. Monica, so good to see you. The Trump team has filed an appeal in Pennsylvania, but NBC's Chief Justice correspondent Pete Williams says it's unlikely to succeed. What can you tell us? Exactly, Lindsay. And not only is it unlikely to succeed, it's also riddled with grammatical errors and other eyebrow-raising items that really just showcase how difficult of a time the president's legal team is having. And partially, that's because some of the members of the team who were presenting at press conferences as recently as a couple of days ago have now been removed from that effort in a behind-the-scenes drama that played out over the weekend. I'm talking about Sidney Powell, who was a lawyer who was named as somebody representing the Trump campaign in that nearly 2-hour press conference on Thursday at Republican National Committee headquarters. She was speaking alongside Rudy Giuliani, who is somebody who had been intimately involved in that Pennsylvania case that you mentioned that was essentially thrown out and dismissed, but is now being appealed in a long shot bid. It just really crystallizes what a difficult time the president is having, though he continues to want to pursue these legal cases. There's something like 36 of them so far that have been brought, and 24 of them have been denied, dismissed, or thrown out. This Pennsylvania case, though, is important because we believe today the state will actually certify its election results. Joe Biden won the state by a pretty significant margin, and we're also looking to Michigan, where President-elect Biden also was victorious, to certify those results, so they may do that in a more dramatic fashion just because of the way that it's done there. But these two states essentially doing this would be a step in the direction of what many Republicans are privately saying is the president finally coming to terms with the fact that he lost this election, but he didn't want to either do that or talk about that in any way until he did play out all his legal options. And so that's what you're seeing happening over the weekend and now. But this shift in the team that was advising him and close to him is just another example of how ill-fated it is, Lindsay.
Yeah, privately saying that kind of the operative word there. But the president is facing some not so private calls to concede, including former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Let's listen to that.
And what's happened here is, quite frankly, The conduct of the president's legal team has been a national embarrassment. I've been a supporter of the president. I voted for him twice, but elections have consequences, and we cannot continue to act as if something happened here that didn't happen. You have an obligation to present the evidence. The evidence has not been presented.
So, Monica, here we're not talking about someone who's been at odds with the president. We're talking about a close ally. At least he was, we believe, before he said that. Any indications that the president is listening?
Yeah, this is somebody who was very intimately involved in the president's own debate prep. You remember, Lindsay, just a couple of weeks ago, he was spending a good amount of time at the White House counseling the president, and then he was sidelined with coronavirus. Chris Christie was, of course, the president was as well. But we are now hearing from other Republican senators, and I think that's what's notable, because even though it's not a complete chorus all singing together, it is a growing group of them. You have Lisa Murkowski of Alaska over the weekend, Kevin Kramer of North Dakota, indicating that a transition does need to start from the outgoing Trump administration over to the incoming Biden team. And you also had Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, a Republican, congratulate Joe Biden as the president-elect and point in that direction. So I think here, what you're waiting for, though, is somebody like Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, to be the one to say something like this. He has allowed the president to pursue all his legal options. And until then, basically, the other Republicans are waiting for cover to join this smaller group of people who are saying, you need to accept reality. You lost the election. Let's make sure that no national security or the vaccine distribution, all these really important things, balls that could get dropped with a transition that is stalled. Let's make sure that that becomes a priority and we start this process. But I have to tell you, Lindsay, as you can hear the banging just a few feet away from where I am, they're building the inaugural viewing stands just in front of the White House. That's something the president is keenly aware of. He knows he is leaving office in less than 2 months, but he is not ready to publicly come out and talk about that. He has nothing on his schedule today for, I believe, the 12th time since the election.
He's got first floor down.
Interesting audible backdrop there. In another move that could create some problems for the incoming Biden administration, NBC is reporting that the president plans to veto.
See? What? This camera's on. Okay. It's like, I just thought I'd tell you, you know. This camera's on YouTube right now. The camera on the TV there, see it? It's on, you're on YouTube right now. There you are, you're on YouTube right now.
Was the source of one of his biggest arguments and frustration with former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, who was terminated via tweet just a few short weeks ago. So if this is something the president does, it would make it complicated, though. The incoming president, Joe Biden, could technically write an executive order making some of these changes, but it does certainly complicate this for the Congress, as it's a massive defense bill that has to be done, and it's not clear exactly how or when the president will act on it.
All right, thank you so much. Good to see you, Monica Alba. We appreciate it. In Wisconsin, it's day 4 of a partial recount focused on Dane and Milwaukee counties. Both of those heavily Democratic counties around Milwaukee and Madison elected Joe Biden by a margin of more than 180,000 votes. The Trump campaign is spending $3 million on the long shot recount and continues to introduce legal challenges in the state. Now, pro-Trump recount observers have slowed down the process by raising frequent objections. Dasha Burns joins us now to break it all down for us. Dasha, Wisconsin election officials were hoping to have this recount finished this week. It's no longer looking like that will be possible, right? The deadline here is December 1st.
No, it's not looking like it'll happen this week. The original timeline was set to finish up this process on Wednesday, but yesterday the county clerk in Milwaukee said that they are going to be going well past Thanksgiving, and it's largely because of the delays caused by these many objections. As of today, the Trump campaign has objected to just under 19,000 ballots in Milwaukee County. This delay here has been particularly acute in Milwaukee, where the county clerk says that they've essentially lost about 2 days of counting because of these objections. And what happens is every time there's an objection, the Board of Canvassers has to meet and rule on that objection, and that often means that the counting process needs to pause. They rule, then they restart again. 2 days out of 4 days, that is about half the time that they have spent on this process already. Those many, many hours have been lost. So it's looking like it will go past Thanksgiving. Unclear when exactly they are aiming now to finish up, but their deadline is December 1st.
And the Trump campaign has observers stationed at the recount facilities who have been raising some objections. What have they been taking issue with?
Yeah,
so there are two separate points on this. There are objections from Trump campaign lawyers. They are objecting to broad categories of ballots, about 3 categories here. The first is any absentee ballots cast in person before Election Day. So in Wisconsin, if you wanted to vote absentee, one option you had was to do that in person, and you could do that early. Interestingly enough, even the head lawyer for the Trump recount effort in Wisconsin, he and his wife used this option. They both voted in-person absentee before Election Day, so they are essentially arguing that their own votes should not be counted. So that's category number 1. Number 2, they are objecting to any ballots that have different colored ink on the ballot. That usually happened when a clerk wrote in the address for a witness. In Wisconsin, absentee voters need a voter signature and a witness signature and an address for both the voter and the witness. There are cases in which the witness forgot to write the address in, and the process allows the clerk to write that in for them, but the Trump campaign is objecting to that part of the process and to those ballots. And then lastly, indefinitely confined voters. So that's the Trump campaign legal team objecting to those categories. Then there are Trump observers in the room who are objecting to various types of ballots, including ballots that have been folded, which necessarily needs to happen for a voter to put a ballot into an envelope, ballots that are in too many piles. There are all sorts of objections that have really frustrated election officials and workers that have created these stopgaps in the process and are now leading to these delays, Lindsay. All right, thank you, Joshua Burns. Thanks, Lindsay. It's been more than 2 weeks since the election was called for Joe Biden, and President Trump's legal fight continues. But with states certifying votes in key battleground states, he's running out of options. Joining us now, NBC News election law analyst Matthew Sanderson. He's also an attorney at the political law group of Kaplan and Drysdale. NBC News is reporting a federal judge in Pennsylvania dismissed President Trump's case Saturday, but his lawyers filed an appeal, which we mentioned, asking the court to reconsider the revision of the original suit. It's filled with grammatical errors. It doesn't ask the judge to overturn the original ruling. Can you shed some light on what this is all about?
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's a lot of sloppy lawyering. This certainly hasn't been a well-executed legal strategy. But I should mention that even the strongest lawyering here wouldn't save the case. The judge that you mentioned in this Pennsylvania case is a conservative judge, and he dismissed it with some flair, actually, calling the arguments Frankenstein's monster and dismissing it pretty easily and quickly. Now, the Trump team has appealed that ruling, or has appealed the procedural posture of that by asking the Third Circuit, the Court of Appeals, to allow for an amendment to its complaint, which is kind of interesting because what they're not when you look at what they're not asking for, they're not asking the Court of Appeals to stop the certification that will happen in Pennsylvania today. They're also not asking for the appeals court to overturn the lower court. And so you have this continual mismatch when you look at the Trump legal and PR strategy that's played out in the post-election period. You have Donald Trump and other people in parking lot press conferences screaming fraud, but then when you get inside the courtroom, the lawyers generally have had more modest claims and objections to how the legal process has played out, how the vote counting process has played out, and this is another instance of that, I think.
Well, President Trump recently turned to focusing on Republican state lawmakers in Michigan in a last-ditch attempt to get them to kind of fix the Electoral College in his favor. Is there any circumstance in which this could happen?
No, this will be a failed effort. There's no real legal mechanism for the legislature in Michigan or in Wisconsin or in any other state to override the will of the voters. And so this is, I think, we've pivoted from, the first little bit after the election the Trump campaign trying to utilize utilize the legal process to overturn the result. And now they pivoted away from that and they started advocating for Americans who are in positions of responsibility to essentially override the will of voters. And I can't think of anything more damaging from the rule of law in this country. We would all be furious if President Trump set the White House on fire on his way out of town. And I think what he's doing here is just as damaging. And that might sound like hyperbole, but it's not. The cornerstone of our
the election. President-elect Joe Biden is moving forward with plans to take office, announcing key nominees for key cabinet positions, including Secretary of State and Homeland Security. NBC political reporter Ali Vitale joins us now from Wilmington. So Ali, we heard we were going to originally hear around Thanksgiving, and we were told Tuesday. It sounds like both came a little early.
I'll tell you, they don't have
definitely came a little early, but the speculation had been percolating, especially since incoming White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said on Sunday that Tuesday was the day. You know, reporters, you give them a tip like that, and they can start calling in.
That's when you know it's half locked. Bounty helps.
It's always one of my says
For no reason.
Earl, Mackenzie.
What is the Patriot Act?
That's it.
Acts of Congress 16.
Weather coverage. News 11 at 7.
Welcome back. The holiday season is nearly here. Have you started decorating yet? UK market research firm YouGo did a survey recently on holiday decor in the US, and the poll found the most popular time to start most popular type of people to start decking their halls is after Thanksgiving, with many decorating the day after Turkey Day. That was followed by folks who decorate sometime after Thanksgiving, but before December starts. And then there were some people, about 27%, who admitted to decorating for the holidays before Thanksgiving takes place. And many would say the best part of the holidays is getting together with family. That means enjoying a festive feast, opening presents, and having, of course, plenty of cleanup. So how much would you pay to avoid holiday cleaning? Well, this might surprise you. Nearly half of Americans would spend up to $5,000. Topping the list of dreaded post-holiday celebration cleanup are doing a pile of dishes, followed by a, quote, top to bottom cleanup of the home. Wow, that is a lot of money. I'm kind of surprised by that. We want to check in now with Jamie Travers for a look at our forecast on this Monday. We bring you first to the slide picture from the boathouse at Forest Park. It definitely looks chilly out there today, Jamie.
It does, and we've lost that sunshine across much of the area. More clouds taken back over because we have some precipitation across the state and clouds coming in off of that. Showing you how it looks at Innsbrook Resort there, the 18th hole. Looking pretty quiet at Innsbrook this morning. We have Perry Cap each one thing we had as thick from Perry County. We have Pacific across Missouri. We have Central